In the final twilight of Babylon's golden age, when the glory of the Chaldeans seemed untouchable, there reigned a king whose pride rose higher than his city's towers. Belshazzar, son of Nabonidus, descendant of Nebuchadnezzar the Great. The city stretched vast and radiant beneath the sun, its walls towering nearly 300 feet, wide enough for chariots to race upon. The hanging gardens swayed with palm and myrtle, and the ziggurats of Marduk glittered with gold. To the nations, Babylon was more than a kingdom. It was eternity built in brick and flame. Yet behind its splendor, decline had begun. Nabonidus, the true king, had long withdrawn to the deserts of Arabia, worshipping the moon god Sin and leaving his son Belshazzar to rule from Babylon. The prophet Jeremiah had spoken of such a time, that Babylon, though it rose like a golden cup in the Lord's hand, would one day make the nations drunk with her pride before she fell. Jeremiah 51:7. But pride rarely listens to prophecy. Belshazzar ruled in opulence, not remembrance. The tales of Nebuchadnezzar's madness, when he was driven from men until he learned that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, Daniel 4:32, were stories the court now recited as curiosities, not warnings. The name of Daniel, the Hebrew seer who had once revealed dreams and humbled kings, had faded into the corridors of old records. Outside the city, the armies of Cyrus the Great, Medes and Persians united, swept across the lands once loyal to Babylon. The empire that Nebuchadnezzar had forged was crumbling at its edges. But inside Babylon, Belshazzar felt secure. The city's walls were unbreachable, its gates impregnable. The Euphrates ran through its heart, ensuring water and trade. "We shall never fall," he declared, laughing at the murmurs of war beyond the river. And so, in defiance of fear and heaven alike, Belshazzar prepared a feast, a banquet for 1,000 of his nobles, a night of excess to prove that Babylon's joy could drown out prophecy. Scripture records, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Daniel 5:1. The palace blazed with torches. Gold gleamed from the tables, the air thick with the scent of wine, incense, and perfumed oil. Harps played, dancers spun, and laughter echoed beneath carved ceilings that told of Babylon's conquests. Every toast was a declaration of invincibility, every drop of wine a defiance of fate. Then, lifted high by arrogance and drink, the king made a command that would change the course of history. "Bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem," he said, "that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein." Daniel 5:2. The order rippled through the court like lightning. Servants hurried to the treasury, returning with sacred vessels, the very ones that had once stood before the Ark of the Covenant in Solomon's temple, before Babylon had sacked Jerusalem decades earlier, 2 Kings 24:13. They gleamed beneath the torchlight, heavy with divine significance, and yet in this hall of pride they became toys for mockery. Belshazzar raised one of the cups, the holy gold now filled with wine. "Let us drink," he cried, "to the gods of Babylon, gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone." And so they drank, and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. Daniel 5:4. The laughter swelled again, but this time it was short-lived, for in that very moment, heaven answered. A silence fell, a stillness so sudden it seemed the air itself refused to move. Then, near the great lampstand, something appeared. A hand, pale and luminous, detached from any body. Its fingers stretched forth and began to write upon the plaster of the wall. The guests froze, the musicians faltered. The king's face drained of color as he watched the hand inscribe words that burned like fire into the stone. The scripture says, "In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote." Daniel 5:5. Terror seized him. Then the king's countenance was changed and his thoughts troubled him. so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Daniel 5:6. His voice cracked as he cried, "Bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers." The wise men came, their robes heavy with symbols, their eyes bewildered by the words that glowed upon the wall. "Whoever can read this writing," Belshazzar shouted, "and show me its interpretation shall be clothed with scarlet, have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Daniel 5:7. They came one by one, the magi, the seers, the diviners, staring at the mysterious inscription. But the words refused to yield their meaning. Then came in all the king as wise men, but they could not read the writing nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Daniel 5:8. The crowd murmured in confusion. Fear rippled through the hall. The king's face grew paler still, and his lords were astonished. Daniel 5:9. Then came the queen, likely the queen mother, daughter of Nebuchadnezzar himself, entering with calm amid the chaos. Her voice cut through the trembling air. "O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him. Even Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar." Daniel 5:10-12. Belshazzar, grasping at hope, sent for Daniel. The prophet, now aged and solemn, was brought before the throne. The king's eyes searched him, the face of a man who had once stood beside Nebuchadnezzar, who had seen dreams and interpreted destinies. "Are you that Daniel?" Belshazzar asked. "Which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in thee. Now if thou canst read the writing and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck." Daniel 5:13-16. Daniel looked upon the trembling king, a man who sat beneath golden idols yet feared a silent wall. His answer came firm and unflinching. "Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation." Daniel 5:17. And then Daniel began to speak of history, of pride, of judgment. "O thou king," he said, "the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, till he knew that the Most High God ruleth in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will." Daniel 5:18-21. The hall was silent. Daniel's voice deepened. "And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified." Daniel 5:22-23. Then Daniel turned toward the inscription. "This is the writing that was written," he said, as the faint letters shimmered once more upon the plaster. "Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin." He paused, letting the weight of each word fill the silence. "This is the interpretation of the thing. Many, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians." Daniel 5:25-28. The last words struck like thunder. The nobles stared, the torches flickered. Belshazzar sat still, his face frozen between disbelief and terror. He gave the command as promised. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel 5:29. Yet even as the prophet was honored, the judgment was already in motion. Beyond the walls of Babylon, the Euphrates River began to fall. Cyrus's forces, led by Gobryas and Darius the Mede, had diverted its flow into the marshes just as the prophet Jeremiah had foretold long before. A drought is upon her waters, and they shall be dried up, for it is the land of graven images, and they are mad upon their idols. Jeremiah 50:38. The river that once protected Babylon now betrayed it. Through the dried riverbed, the soldiers marched, finding the gates along its course left open, just as Isaiah had prophesied of Cyrus a century earlier. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, I will open before thee the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. Isaiah 45:1. Within the palace the revelry staggered on, the drunken nobles unaware that the enemy already walked the streets. The torches burned low. The laughter grew faint. Somewhere, the echo of Daniel's words lingered in the king's mind. Numbered, weighed, divided. And that night, Scripture says simply, in that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. And Darius the Mede took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Daniel 5:30-31. So fell Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency. Isaiah 13:19. Not by siege, nor by famine, but by the quiet judgment of heaven. A single night turned gold to dust and laughter to silence. The river that had sustained her became the path of her destroyers. The walls that had seemed eternal became tombstones of pride. In the ruins long after the fires had died, travelers would stand amid the desolation and recall the prophet's words. Babylon shall become heaps a dwelling place for dragons and astonishment, and an hissing without an inhabitant. Jeremiah 51:37. And among the fallen stones they would whisper the inscription that had once burned upon her palace wall, the words that condemned a king and a kingdom alike. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. God had numbered the kingdom and finished it. He had weighed it and found it wanting. He had divided it and given it away. Centuries later, when Persia itself had fallen to Greece and Greece to Rome and Rome to time, Daniel's interpretation would still echo as eternal truth, that the Most High rules in the affairs of men. Nations rise and nations fall, but his hand writes still upon the walls of history. The story of Belshazzar endures as more than the fall of a city. It is the warning of pride that forgets heaven, of strength that mocks holiness. For the hand that wrote judgment on Babylon's wall writes upon the hearts of kings and men alike, reminding all who rid it that power, when divorced from reverence, becomes its own undoing. And thus in the silence of Babylon's ruins one can almost hear the whisper of the river beneath its dust. The river that once flowed proud and full, that carried the weight of empires, murmuring of that night when the hand wrote judgment.